Okay, look, I know putting Crooked Kingdom in the thumbnail is very clickbaity, but it is still one of my least favorite books of 2020, and also I literally threw out every single copy. Well, not threw out, I donated and gave away every single copy of the books that I read in 2020 that I hated. So this is literally the only physical copy of my least favorite books of 2020 that I still have. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to clickbait. Hello everyone, it's me Jamie, welcome back to another video. Yes, as the title says, today I am going to be doing my most disappointing reads of 2020. That isn't to be confused with like worse, like these books aren't exactly like terrible, they're not really badly written. Some of them there's not even a lot wrong with them, I was just like really disappointed. Either I had hyped them up or they sounded really promising and then just didn't deliver. That's actually it. I'm not going to spend like 20 minutes bad mouthing these books, they were just like really disappointing. I think the reason I had quite a few disappointing books is because I genuinely was like going to the library and just like finding a book that looked interesting and picking it up without reading any reviews of that book, or like picking books that I had had on my bookshelf for ages, not really knowing much about them and not knowing anyone else that had read them as well, just seeing them and being like, oh, I haven't heard of this, I'm gonna try it out, and then it being really disappointing. So a lot of it is like my own fault, but I think that's probably why I had so many disappointing reads this year or last year. But you know what, I think this is a perfect segue to go into the sponsor of this video. So today's video sponsor is Likewise, which is a new app which recommends you books and TV shows and movies. It is completely free to download, which is incredible. Basically, you make an account, and what's really cool about it is that every single day it will give you recommendations based on books that you've already said that you've liked. So you can swipe through and say that if you've already read it or if you're interested in saving it, and then once you've clicked save, they all go into your saves list, and then you have all the books that you have said that like look interesting, that is just sitting there. And one of my other favorite features is that you can ask the community for recommendations. For example, if you're looking for like a really fun romance with like a slow burn, you know, friends to lovers vibe, you can just ask that book and people in the community will respond and give you recommendations, which I think is awesome. I also love that feature because I personally love giving recommendations and love like forcing people to read my favorite books. So like I will find any ask that is like, what's like a dark academia book? And I'll be like, oh, The Secret History. You can also do this for movies and TV shows, so it's basically just like all forms of media all in one app, which I just think is really, really cool. Also, if you find a book that you're interested, it will give you a link to buy it directly from Amazon, which again is just super easy to access. It's also got a really easy and accessible interface, so a lot of problems that I find with apps that I download is that they're really confusing and I really don't like how they look, but this one actually looks stunning, amazing, very simple and very accessible. So I cannot recommend this enough. I cannot wait to continue exploring this app with movies and TV shows as well. I've already found some really cool books to read. I've already asked some questions. So if anyone wants to download this app, I will leave a link down below. It really will support my channel. So like if you are interested, please click that link, and you can also add me on the app and we can share recommendations with each other. And yeah, I'm just super excited. So again, thank you so much Likewise for sponsoring this video. And guys, seriously, I recommend this app. Don't be like me and just read anything that you think looks interesting and have a terrible reading year. Go and find recommendations from trusted sources in the community. I honestly couldn't recommend it enough. So yeah, thank you so much Likewise. So without further ado, let's get into the 10 most disappointing reads of 2020 for me. So the first book that I read in 2020 was actually ended up being like a 1-star read. It was terrible, but it is The Party by Robin Harding. I picked this up secondhand because the blurb said that it was very similar to, it was a book that was very similar to Leanne Moriarty, and I feel like Leanne Moriarty writes what I like to describe as like mum fiction. Like it's like domestic thrillers and it's like about like family dramas, but nothing's really like at stake, but it's still like really dramatic. So like absolutely love those vibes, and this book seemed to be very similar. It's basically about a family who has like this rebellious child. She's turning like 13 or 14, I can't really remember, and she invites her friends over, and then the dad like sneaks them some alcohol, and then one of them accidentally like falls on a glass table, one of the kids that's not the child of the family, like, and like cuts her face, and like then there's this whole like lawsuit that happens after that between like the parents of this child who cut her face and then like our main family. This was just really disappointing because I was like, love a bit of mum fiction, love a bit of Leah Moriarty inspiration, and it just wasn't that at all. I feel like Leah Moriarty's writing, she writes like Big Little Lies and those other books. I feel like she writes with this really great sense of humour. She writes very tongue-in-cheek and it's all very dramatic and fun, whereas this just like wasn't fun at all. There was no humour behind it. The characters were all really, really unlikable. There was like nothing there going for them. There was also this really gross relationship between the dad and one of his daughter's friends who was like hitting on him, but then like we were supposed to see him as the hero for like not coming onto her advances, but then we were seeing in his inner monologue he was talking about how pretty she was even though she wore so much makeup. It was just like really not good. I feel like reading this book at the start of the year just like summed up 2020 for me. It just wasn't fun. I definitely don't recommend it, and I don't think I'll be picking anything up by this author ever again, even though I have seen some of her books that I'm like, oh, that looks like a really interesting premise. I was just way too disappointed with the party, so I just don't think that's an author I'm going to be reading ever again. The next book on my list is The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn, and this probably might take the cake as like the worst book that I have read in 2020. It was just so bad. The reason that I really wanted to read this is because it was a thriller that everyone was talking about. Lots of people who read a lot of thrillers really enjoyed this book, and it was turning into a movie with Amy Adams, so I was like so stoked to pick this up, and then it was just so bad. Okay, so it's about this woman who is a recluse in a New York apartment, and she has lost her family, so now she's like afraid to go outside, and then she sees something terrible happen in the window like opposite to her apartment. It's very much like Rear Window, the film by Alfred Hitchcock, if you've seen that. And then like no one believes that she's seen this like really awful like crime happen to her neighbors, and then things just like progress from there. First of all, I just thought it was really like way too slow. Like basically we were just learning about this character who was like had alcoholism and depression, and just really like was so boring and bleak to read about. Like it just really wasn't fun. The actual like incident in the book doesn't happen till like page 150, so that whole beginning of building up this character that I just ended up hating was just really poor storytelling in my opinion. Like maybe if the character had some more like positive traits, that amount of character development and like storytelling would have been fine in the beginning, but I just needed the story to progress faster because I just hated the character so much and like being inside her head. Also, it was just a little bit ridiculous because this book was so obviously inspired by the movie Rear Window, and also the character kept referencing Alfred Hitchcock movies. I was literally just like, why are we doing this? Like you're literally just proving that you've like ripped off Alfred Hitchcock. Okay, cool. I also like guessed literally everything, which was annoying because I kind of, this is a personal thing, but I love like when my thrillers like surprise me, but this one just didn't surprise me at all. And also like the evil character at the end had a mental illness, and it was just like super demonizing for people who are mentally ill, and it just wasn't done in the right way. And also this story was written by a man with like under a pseudonym, which kind of rubs me the wrong way anyway, but you know, I feel like that is a conversation for another time. Basically, it was written by a man about a woman who lost all sense and purpose in her life when she lost her husband and her child, which kind of like, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it just really tells me that this author believes that all women are meant to be are like wives and mothers, and they have no other sense or purpose in their life other than being that role in society. And maybe it's not that deep. Maybe like she just loved her family so much and like, you know, was grieving. But from the way the author was writing it, I just did not believe that that was the case. It was just really like, okay, cool. So now that she doesn't have a husband or a child, she's just a menace to society. She's just like, no, I just don't fuck with that. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna be more careful with the thrillers that I pick up from now on because this just wasn't it. The next book I read that was a huge disappointment was A Lesson in Thorns by Sarah Simone. This was so hyped up last year and the year before, I think. Like this was so hyped up. This is basically a polyamorous romance about a group of 6 characters who grew up together at this like beautiful castle, and then something bad happens, and then they have to like, I think maybe something goes down with the parents of these children, but they have to go back to this castle, and then just lots of sex ensues. Like that's basically it. I can't tell you the rest of the plot because all I remember is the sex. This book was just so disappointing because so many people compared it to like the smutty secret history, and girl, no, that is just not the case. This is not smutty secret history. Like this is just porn, really. Like don't get me wrong, like I love erotica and I love like smut in books. That's why I love romance. Like, well, it's not why I love romance, but I do love like a little bit of erotica. I think when erotica is really well written, it can be like really beautiful. I just think the majority of our characters were like super underdeveloped. So when we did read the smut, it like, I just wasn't connected to the characters at all or their like enjoyment. So that's why I feel like I just read like really bad porn. Also, there was like just too much of it. Like it was just a little bit like overload. Also, I feel like people really like to compare this to the Secret History because they consider the fact that it has like lyrical writing. But I felt like the writing style was really bad because like there were some moments of really beautiful lyrical writing where she's like describing the castle and describing the surroundings, but then she'd jump to like some dialogue or a conversation between two characters and it would just be like really black and white. Like I feel like I'd be reading like a middle grade. Despite the content of what's happening, I just feel like the style of how the characters talk to each other and in like actual like physical interactions, the writing was really nothing special. It was just like very easy to understand, very simple, like not much going on there. So I felt like the juxtaposition between the two writing styles to be incredibly jarring, and I feel like maybe our author could have blended it a little bit better. I just felt like this book was really disappointing because of all the comparisons people have made to like other books that I love, and it also has a bunch of tropes that I really like really chaotic bisexual characters, like actual proper love triangles, like a big ensemble cast, and it just delivered like none of the joy that I usually get from those tropes. So yeah, I also heard that the plot twist in the sequel is absolutely shocking, disgusting, terrible, and I know what it is, and I can confirm that I find it shocking, disgusting, and terrible. So I will not be picking up the rest of the series, and I'm not even sure if I might be giving this author another go. Yeah, no, just really disappointing. The next book is another contender for like worst book that I read in 2020, and it is The Waiter by Matthias Feldbacken. I cannot tell you what this book is about because there's no plot. I thought it'd be really interesting because basically we just follow a waiter who works in a really high class European restaurant, and about like his interactions like with customers and like regulars and like listening to their conversations and their drama, but like literally nothing happened. It was so weird. Like this book stylistically was so strange. No plot. All the characters didn't have names. They were called like the waiter or the bar manager or like something else or some other weird nickname. So we also didn't really get to know any characters. There was also no sense of humor, and also the writing itself was so bland. Like he didn't take any stylistic choices, or if he did, they were just like hard, like I just couldn't see it. Also, like I really felt like this book should have been set in like the 1930s, the way that like the character talked about women or like talked about like, you know, classist structures, but then all of a sudden he brings out an iPhone. So I was like, what's actually going on? I just feel like this author thought he was J.D. Salinger writing the next Catcher in the Rye, because it was just so pretentious, and I feel like this man just thought he could get away with writing like literally nothing and sell books. And I mean, he did. I was the sucker who bought a book, which I've since gotten rid of, but it was just a mess. Nothing there. Don't even want to read it again. Don't even want to think about it ever again. No. The next most disappointing read that I read in 2020 was Credence by Penelope Douglas. My god, how do I even describe this? Okay, so this is a reverse harem about a girl who is the daughter of like a famous movie director, famous movie actor, I'm not sure, two famous people, like living the life. When her parents die, she realizes that she has like a step uncle living in like the woods in like Alaska or something with two step brothers. So she goes to move there, and it's also like in the dead of winter, so they're about to be like snowed in and stuff, and so she has to live this life of like being like this rich city girl to now like hiking and going hunting and shit. But then she also has like a weird relationship with all three of the men that she moves in with, and it's just like super smutty and like, yeah. I thought this would be really fun because I really liked Penelope Douglas's book Punk 57, which I read like a few days before this one, and everyone had talked about how this one was like really intense and like really smutty and like crazy. Like a lot of people that I watch really liked it. I just felt uncomfortable, and like people call it like a taboo romance. People are like, oh, it's very taboo, like watch out, it's taboo, and they talk about how they like taboo romances. Girl, one of the men is a rapist. Sorry, I don't think there's anything taboo about sexual assault. Let's call it what it is, which is sexual assault. I just am so comfortable with people saying like, oh, it's taboo, and really it's like literal rape. Like, it just, I don't know, it just makes me uncomfortable. I think that's a conversation for another day though. That's a different conversation. But yeah, I mean, just even despite that, like a lot of this book I just found to be very far-fetched, very convoluted, very like, I mean, there's still something a bit iffy about like step family, and even though you've never met them, it's still just kind of like, yeah, it's, oh, family, gross. I also just found all the men to be like really toxic, which just wasn't fun to read about. Like, I mean, I really like a toxic male character, but like three of them at once, I'm just like, oh, that's a bit much. That's a bit much for me. Too much masculine energy in the studio. No, I don't know. It was also really long for what it was. I just didn't like the length of the book. It took me ages to read it. There was also a threesome that just sounded uncomfortable. Also, I couldn't get over the fact that she was like having sex with 2 brothers at once. Why am I literally tearing up thinking about how uncomfortable that makes me? I was just like excited to read this because it was like Penelope Douglas's like brand new release, and like, yeah, I don't know, just disappointing. Maybe it was too early in my romance career for me to read this, but yeah, just slightly disappointing. And it took me a while to really like think about how much I hated it. Like when I first finished it, I was like, 3 stars, and now I'm like, oh, 1 star. So yeah, it was one that kind of sat with me over a long time, and I was like, no, actually I hated this. Yeah, if you are new to romance, don't pick this up, because I was pretty new to romance going into this, and the things I have seen with my eyes, no. Yeah, no. The next most disappointing book of 2020, Crooked Kingdom. Okay, so I did an entire reading vlog where I reread Six of Crows and then read this in the same vlog, and I love Six of Crows so much, which is basically why this was so disappointing, because of how much I love Six of Crows. I think Six of Crows is literally like the perfect YA fantasy. Like, you cannot fault it. Like, characters excellent, plot excellent, pacing, structure, all of it is so excellent. So that's why this really disappointed me, because I felt like the structure was really just missing. Like, it was all over the place, and some of our characters were doing things that I thought to be quite uncharacteristic. They were just doing things that weren't really their vibe, in my opinion. I also was disappointed because so many people, this is their favourite book, and they like it better than Six of Crows. So that's why I was going into it expecting to be like amazed, and I just really wasn't. I don't really want to talk about it too much because I do have a whole vlog, so I'll link that down below, where I definitely go into like the ins and outs of why I was disappointed. It's still 3 out of 5 stars. Like, I still liked it, but like if this book wasn't in this video would be worst books of 2020. But because it is, it's most disappointing, because I was truly disappointed by this. It was still good, but just not what everyone says it is. But yeah, I'll link my vlog down below and you guys can see what I mean. I just don't want to like revisit my thoughts because they make me sad. I also didn't cry once, and like, maybe I'm a cold-hard bitch, but I just felt like my disappointment for the book in the beginning meant that towards the last half of the book I just wasn't emotionally invested. The next book I was really disappointed by is The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This is a feminist retelling of the Trojan War. We follow our character Briseis, who is basically a wife of a Trojan who gets won by the Greeks as like a spoil of war and sold to be Achilles' like bed slave, essentially. Basically the whole thing that is supposed to be feminist about this is that it's told from her perspective, but from her perspective all we see really is like her getting raped and like all of the other like women in the camp like being raped. So I really don't see how it was feminist when we didn't really change any of the content about the Trojan War. And like, I know that it's a retelling, and like in these myths, like the truth is that like women were treated as objects that were won by the men, in a very male story and a very male part of classics in history. But I feel like with a retelling you have liberties to change what you want and do stuff creatively, and I felt like the author didn't do anything particularly feminist or creative with this retelling. It was just very much like the same story but harder to read about because it was from a female perspective. The writing was like nice, but it wasn't really anything special. I usually really love retellings, which is why I was excited for this. Like, The Song of Achilles is one of my favorite books, and that's essentially a retelling of the same story. So of course I was excited, but I feel like The Song of Achilles did so much more for feminism in a way, because I feel like, sure, The Song of Achilles is about 2 men in a male story that fall in love, but we still have these like female side characters, like Achilles' mum. I forgot what her name is, but it's on the tip of my tongue, but she's a god. Like, we have Achilles' mum, and like we have Briseis in The Song of Achilles, and they are like fully fleshed out side characters, and we see them from a perspective that isn't just like objects or like things to be won. And in a way I felt like that male-male love story was way more feminist than this female perspective of the Trojan War, and that's why I was really disappointed, because I was going in expecting it to be something that was like really different and really empowering, and I just felt like it wasn't. That's really all I have to say about it. I was also really bored when I read it because I was just like, oh, more rape. No. Anyway, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. The next book I read that was super disappointing was Stags by M.A. Bennett. This is supposed to be like YA dark academia about a really elite group of like rich students who go to this really rich boarding school that invite like the poorer kids to some sort of hazing, and they invite them away to this like weekend holiday. So our main character is like, oh, maybe I'm finally becoming popular, and like same with these other kids, but then they end up like hunting them, and that's what the whole game is that like these rich kids take these poor or like underprivileged teenagers to their like lake house and kill them essentially, or like seriously maim them and traumatize them. I felt like this could be really fun because it kind of reminded me of like the movie Ready or Not, or like, you know, The Secret History in a way, like just dark academia, and it just really wasn't fun at all. It was really boring, really weird, really strangely complicated. All of our like rich characters were completely the same. Like no one had any distinct voice or any distinct characteristics other than just like being a different gender. Like there were like 3 girls, 3 guys or something, and I just couldn't tell any of them apart. It was just so awfully poorly written, and I just felt like the plot didn't even make sense at all. I didn't know what was going on half the time. It was really strange, and at first I thought it was going to be like kind of like Bunny, like it was just like weirdly fun and strange and just kind of ridiculous, but in a really well written way. But that's not the case. It was just like really messy and just really poorly written, essentially. Like plot not there, structure not there, character motivations absolutely not there. I definitely don't recommend this. I picked this up at the library like on a whim because Caitlin was like, I read it like 10 years ago, I can't remember what it's about, but I remember it being kind of fun. And then I read it and I was like, Caitlin, what are you talking about? She's like, to be fair, I don't remember a single thing about that book, so you're on your own. So yeah, I also read this in a 24-hour readathon vlog, but I don't think I finished it in that. But yeah, I'll probably have more thoughts there, but like honestly, I hardly remember anything about this. I don't know a single character's name. I just remember it being really bad. I also rated it 1 star. All of these books are like 1 star, with the exception of Cuckoo Kingdom, which was 3, and Silence of the Girls, which was 2. But yeah, no. The next book that I read in 2020 that was really disappointing is Keep Her Safe by Sophie Hannah. This is another thriller that I completely picked up on a whim at the library just because I read the back and was like, this looks kind of fun. Basically, it's about a woman who needs to take a break from her family, so she goes away, spends all of her money to book this like room in this really fancy resort, and when she's there she accidentally walks into someone else's hotel room, and in it she sees a man and a child, and this child looks completely similar to a child who had been like missing, kind of like a Madeleine McCann kind of case. And so she starts to investigate it and shit gets crazy. I literally don't remember a single thing about this book. Like I only could have told you this plot because of what I read on Goodreads. This literally went in one eye and out the other, like nothing retained the information, and I don't think that's my fault. I think it's this book's fault because nothing was thrilling, nothing was interesting, nothing actually stuck. Like it was just so poorly written and so boring. I mean, the only reason it's on this list is because I saw it at the library and was like, this looks really fun, and then I just can't remember a single thing about it, and I read it in November, like 2 months ago. Yeah, honestly, moral of the story is don't pick up random thrillers that you've never heard of before at the library because you will be disappointed, and that's all I have to say about it. And the last book I have to talk about is Louis and Louise by Julie Cohen. I talked about this most recently in my December wrap-up and why I found it so disappointing. But yeah, basically this is supposed to be another feminist story about a person who was born, and we follow like them in different parallel universes from when they were born, from if they were born as a guy and if they were born as a girl. And it's supposed to be kind of like a story about like how someone's like gender changes them and like changes their quality of life. I just thought it was just not feminist at all. Like I just don't know why all these like books that claim to be really feminist just aren't. Like this was just so bad. Like I don't really know what the point of the book was. It wasn't really telling us anything that we don't know already as a woman, and I feel like this is a book that is marketed towards women. Yeah, like in the female storyline she gets raped, but then in the male storyline the guy that rapes her like kills himself. And so it's just this really weird story of like by getting raped she saved this guy's life, and then at the end of the book she forgives him. What's feminist about that? I just find it so terrible. Like also the writing was just like really boring. Also the actual like plot that we're supposed to be following that isn't this like rape storyline is like one of her parents is like dying of cancer, and it was just like I felt no emotion for anyone in this book. I just don't understand the plot. I just don't understand, and I just don't understand why this book even exists. And that's literally all I have to say about it because I don't even want to think about it anymore. And also I talked about it more extensively in my December wrap up, and I just don't want to repeat myself. I mean, watch it if you want, but I have no reason why I would recommend this book to anyone. Like this is just so bad. So yeah, those are all the books that I read in 2020 that were greatly disappointing. I don't want to say I hope you got recommendations from this video, but happy to leave you with a warning about these books if you do decide that you are a sucker for punishment and you want to pick them up. Also, if these are like some of your favorite books or if you really like them, I mean, no offense, I'm just stating my opinions. Feel free to argue with me in the comments. I actually kind of like a heated discussion about people's opinions, so would greatly appreciate that. Let me know what your worst books of 2020 were. I always love those videos. I just love, sometimes they even make me want to pick up the book, like, not gonna lie. But yeah, so yeah, again, thank you for watching, and also again, thank you so much likewise for sponsoring this video. I will be sure to be using the app now to get my recommendations instead of just trying to get lucky at the library, because I have not really found any good books that way. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.
She said, Cindy, don't cry.